Phillip Rivers announced this week that he's retiring as a Charger. And Mike Williams suddenly retiring from the Chargers as well. What does that do for the offense in 2025? Let's get into it. It is truly an end of an era. We saw the tribute. Well, some of you did. I wasn't prepared emotionally to watch Phillip Rivers' speech in regarding him retiring as a Charger in 2025. But there is some good news and some bad news in regards to the Chargers in the last few months, as we can see that Mike Williams suddenly retired. But Phillip Rivers finally coming back home to the Chargers, signing a deal to allow him to retire as a Charger was good news. Antonio Gates going into the Hall of Fame this year, will be inducted next week. So yeah, some bittersweet news going around the franchise. But I think all in all, I think we're looking up, we're trending up. So I can't really complain in that space. But yeah, it's definitely a glass case of emotions. Shout out to Ron Burgundy in regards to what's happening with the Chargers organization right now. Seeing Phillip Rivers, pay tribute, pay homage, and kind of underscore his career. I'm freestyling because again, I didn't watch the video yet. Really was not prepared to see him be emotional and talking about his career as a Charger. Phillip Rivers is quite honestly, the quarterback that I, grew as a fan with. In all honesty, I was enamored with Drew Brees, but he didn't stay long. Phillip Rivers came in. He actually was drafted a year I became a fan. So I pretty much was, a Phillip Rivers, I guess you can say fan, and from the time he was drafted to the time he left the organization in 2019. So, in talking about Phillip Rivers' career, I mean, what can you say? It's definitely a conversation that can be had. A lot of people arguing because of his accolades, but yet no Super Bowls. Is he a Hall of Famer? I would argue again. My obviously my opinion is biased for most people's eyes, but I mean, just looking at the numbers and stretch, if you just blind resume don't pick the team, he definitely rivals numbers that certain Hall of Famers may or may not have. Honesty. And just talking about what he's done as a Charger. I mean, it's not without I guess you can say lacking a football Super Bowl victories, I guess you can say, but I mean, he's done a lot in this league. Again, it's a lot to behold, and he's right in the top 10 in all major record passing categories and things of that nature. He's 6th all time in passing yards. I think he's 4th all time in passing touchdowns to this day. He finished his career with a 95 passer rating, 8-time Pro Bowler, comeback player of the year, MVP finalist. He led the league in passing TDs in 08, led the league in yards in 2010. He led the league in passer rating in 08. Again, he's over 63,000 in passing yards. Again, 6th all time. Again, he has a lot of accolades and a lot of Chargers records that would at least, he's definitely a Chargers Hall of Famer. Whether or not he's a Pro Football Hall of Famer will remain to be seen, once he's fully eligible, because I think his retirement announcement, he's officially retiring from the league now in 2025, so he's not eligible for 5 years. So it won't be till at least 2030 where he start to even get votes. But yet again, great career. Like I said, I grew as a fan watching Phillip Rivers. He was the main quarterback that I have experienced in my time frame with the organization. And I can go on and on for hours and days and years about what Phillip Rivers has meant to this organization, right? And then most people that are current fans are really deeply invested in the fan base. That's their guy. We talk about Dan Fouts and Stan Humphries who took him to the Super Bowl, and other quarterbacks in those spaces, Drew Brees, now it's Justin Herbert, obviously, who I would argue that if he stays on the trajectory he's on, he's going to be the all-time best Chargers quarterback in all of history, right? But, for this moment, this time, in this frame, for the modern era, Phillip Rivers is the guy for the San Diego / LA Chargers. So, kudos to Phillip. We appreciate you. I just don't uh uh like the idea of how things went throughout his career. Um, I'm still very, very, I guess you can say, upset, bitter about the idea how they did, uh, hi- how he did his career. Once they fired Marty Schottenheimer. He definitely had his best years under Marty, and I definitely was thinking that was going to be an upward trend, how things were going to go. You know, and although he finished 134 and 106 in his career, I think that his him coming out the gate with what do you think he was 14-2 his first starting year, and then 11-5 on the Marty. Again, went to the AFC title game, was a half away from being in the Super Bowl, and then you have some differences between the head coach and ultimately fired the best head coach he had in his career, bar none. I mean, there's no argument about the fact that Marty Schottenheimer was Philip Rivers' best coach that he had. So in that particular space, I don't like the way the organization did him. They did a lot of they did him a lot of injustice. Let me put it that way. They did him a lot of injustice because they did not support him like they should have. Like I said, the height of his career, the height of the weaponry and the O line he had with the 04 to '09 Charger regime, mostly under Marty. Had a great O line. Had a Hall of Fame running back in Damian Thompson. Had now a Hall of Fame tight end Antonio Gates. Yeah, Vincent Jackson, a 6'5", leaping machine, that was it's just amazing at contested catches. Yeah, Malcolm Floyd as well as a second receiver. It was a great time to be a Chargers fan. It really was during that time frame. All the fumbling, bumbling behind that was very traumatic for fans. It really was, and I'm sure for Philip as well. He gave us his best. He did his best. Being a pocket passer and being a person that didn't have a really good O line after the Marty Schottenheimer regime lets you know that coaching understands O line play and the organization does not. Every coach you brought in subsequently after that did not address the O line properly, nor did the GM, nor did the front office in any facet. It was very makeshift and very porous O lines that he had after the '09 season. We're talking about 11 years worth of football that he played that didn't have great O lines. Didn't have great running backs. One of Damian Thompson left in the mid 2010s as well. So yeah, I think they did Philip Rivers a little bit of a disservice, but again, I'm not gonna cry with Spielberg. I think he still had a great career, and I think he did a lot with a little. That would makes an elite quarterback in my book. They're doing a lot with not a lot to have as a supporting cast. You can do more with less. That makes you an elite quarterback in my book. Today, yesterday, and tomorrow. Doing more with less makes you an elite quarterback because you can carry and uplift the franchise on your back, and you can do things with your talent and your talent alone. So shout out to Philip Rivers, man. I wish him well in his retirement. He's doing well. He's got a bunch of kids. Few of his oldest sons are playing football. One is a quarterback now. I think his name is Gunner. It's a good time. He's a coach now, so it's going to be a good time. I'm just curious about what game they're actually going to end. Give him his retirement ceremony. It's going to be a good send off, and for a Chargers fan, it's probably going to be an emotional one. But hey, it's well deserved by him, and I can't wait to see him, don the colors possibly one more time, and we get to see him ride off into the sunset as the San Diego / LA Charger in one more final time, as he's fully retired from the NFL. So shouts out to Philip, man. We give you all the praise and all the glory, man. You did as well as a quarterback for the time you were here. So moving forward and talking about another guy that retired recently is Mike Williams. Mike Williams retired suddenly at the start of training camp. He was going to be put on the PUP list, and right before things really got going from a camp perspective, he decided to retire. Mike, had some ups and downs. I mean, he had a decent career. Starting, from the 2017 season, drafted high. I think he was fifth overall by the Chargers in the 2017 draft. He had high hopes coming out of Clemson and things of that nature. But injuries, man, definitely, hampered and plagued his career from his entirety. I would say that I think that he may have played one or maybe two seasons in this over 13 or 14 games. The rest were mired with injury, long-lasting injuries, a lot of lower body injuries and things of that nature. He had an ACL tear. It was not a broken back, but he had a real bad back issue 2-3 years ago now, right before that Jaguars playoff run. So it's a lot to put on Mike in regards to him being, what they thought was going to be the number one / number two receiver on the team when they drafted him. But that tandem of him and Keenan Allen was pretty good. I definitely would give him credit for that. That tandem was really good. I definitely appreciated that group, with Phillip Rivers and then partly with Justin Herbert for the small time they were there together. It was a good sight. I think they brought different skill sets that were matchup nightmares for a lot of defenses. So he did his job, when he was on the field. But again, I think injuries just really got the better of him. I think that the problem really was the fact he just really couldn't stay healthy, and I think that it really weighed on him as he got older. He really just couldn't seem to get right every time he turned around. He had a nagging injury, which landed him on the pup list in his own right. Um, but again, despite all that, he was one of the best 50-50 ball catchers that we ever saw. I think that that's one of the things that I said it, before I said it again, that, if it was a 50-50 chance that you and the defender were coming down with it, Mike would come down and with it probably 75 to 80% of the time. And that's a high catch rate. So I think, I shout out to him, kudos to him in his retirement. I think he might be getting out before it really gets to the point where he's really hampered by injuries long term, because that's a thing. When you start to get injured, you have to consider the future. And you might be looking at a position where your body really be broken down once you get a little bit older in your late 30s, early 40s. So maybe he decided to get out before things really got rough for him. And I commend that. I commend that. It's a loss for the Chargers, but you have to move on and respect the man's decision. And I definitely do that. Appreciate what he's done for the franchise and things of that nature. But if it's time, it's time. We're not gonna argue with when it's time. If your body tells you it's time, it's time to go ahead and hang it up, because you don't want to hang around too long and be wheelchair ridden or hampered or really can't live your life to the fullest once you're done playing football, right? Because you really get done in your early 30s, and you got your whole life to live after that. So you want to be able to live it well. So kudos to Mike, wish him well in his future endeavors, man. And he will be missed as a Charger. I thought we had one more run with him, but it just wasn't meant to be. It is what it is. But so if you ask the question about what's going to happen since Mike is not going to be there, and we still don't know what Keenan is going to do or not going to do, I'm not sure about that. Time is ticking in regards to what the receiving core is going to look like, because it did take a hit. And if you've been watching me on my channel here in the last few, I guess you can say times and months and things of that nature, the backup plan is here. In all honesty, I'm not overly concerned about Mike not being there, because I said in the beginning that Trey Harris was going to be Mike Williams' replacement. And I mean that. And the fact that he signed, I believe the same day that Mike retired, was a sign that, the Chargers understood that we need to get this guy in house and he needs to start practicing, because we weren't going to have Mike at all. And I would argue that I think we might have a better version of Mike, because he doesn't carry the injury concerns, at least as right now, knock on wood, he never does. That he's going to be a better version of Mike Williams, in all honesty, a better X receiver and a more available one in that space. I would argue that. Because I'll be honest with you guys and fans, and I'm very transparent with what I believe and how I see things. Right, I wasn't high on Trey Harris when they drafted. I was looking at it from a perspective. I wanted Matthew Golden, I wanted Mecca Ibuka, maybe even Jaden Higgins. More of a bigger body receiver. More of a highly contested catching receiver. When because I didn't think Mike was a long term solution. I thought it was kind of a stopgap. So when we didn't, I guess you can say pick any of those guys, or those guys were picked ahead of us in the second round, we were limited with our options. But Trey Harris being on the board at that time frame, they took him and they thought they could definitely utilize him, in his offense. I had my questions. His top end speed, his size, his frame, his all these things for him being a quote unquote second round pick, and what would he contribute to this offense? I was wondering. But in seeing him now that he's seemingly fully healthy now, because I think that some of the film I watched in the past, they didn't really harp on it when he was playing, but he was injured a lot in his college standpoint. Now, these weren't quote unquote detrimental injuries. He growing here, pull muscle there. Just some nagging things he had going on was kind of hampering him from being at top physical peak shape and ability to utilize his skills in the open field and things of that nature. So now I'm really seeing it for the first time, and at OTAs and now training camp. And I like what I see. I do like what I see, and I think I think I've underscored this point, and I'm gonna reiterate it: the fact that he is, to me, like I say, he's a better version of Mike Williams. He's a better X receiver. He's really good at the contested catch. He's even better after the catch. He's a better route runner. And I think that he's an aggressive and a very strong hands catcher, which I absolutely positively love, because that's my knock on Quentin Johnston. not a great hands catcher. I think that he does not concern himself with the idea of him, being able to catch the football. He knows he can catch the football. So what he does after that is going to be special, in my opinion. Just seeing him in one-on-ones and OTA so far and what he's done since he's been in camp, it's something to see. I think this kid could be special. So losing Mike, might not be as detrimental as people might believe, because I think that Trey Harris is going to come right in. I think him and Ladd are the lead dogs at this moment to be on the field on a lot come week one. Pray for his health, pray for his, that he stays upright and whole and doesn't have any nagging things happen to him. That goes for anybody. But I think that if Trey Harris keeps on his trajectory, I think he's going to be the X receiver starting week one for the Chargers. I think he is. I really is. I would love to see him a little bit in training camp. I'm not sure if they're going to play him or not, because he's such a high draft pick. But if he does play at all in any facet, I want to see what he can do against NFL competition, because I really believe that he can be somebody special. I really love what he does, and he's slowly but surely growing on me. Like I said, I had my reservation at one point, but him being a contested catch demon, good after the run, good after the catch, being strong, physical. He can get up. He has great release off the line. Trying to get away from jams and things of that nature. So the Chargers might have stole one. I had my reservations, but they Chargers might have stole one. I'm hoping they did, and I'm hoping that I'm right when I say that. So we'll see how things go, man. But I'm loving what I see from Trey Harris so far. And another one I kind of called. I actually tweeted the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh, and of course they don't listen or answer those things directly. But I tweeted when Adam Schefter broke the news that Nyheim Hines was fully healthy, finally after 2 years from his ACL tear, which was unfortunate and ironic, because he didn't tear it playing football. He tore it on a jet ski on vacation, which is a weird freak accident. But him being fully healthy, and what doctors tell you about ACL tears and knee injuries in general, you're typically better in year two. So he spent 2 years away. He's back. And what he was for the Colts and was going to be for the Bills was going to be a dynamic kick returner, punt returner, and a great third down back. And I think that he's going to bring that to the Chargers. I really do. I think, like I said, him being off the year two of that surgery, he should be fully healthy and whole and looking explosive again. I think he's going to be a great guy in open space. So catching the ball out the backfield is going to be a good thing for him on third downs. Assuming Marion Hampton, can't do it or needs a blow in certain spaces, I think he's going to be a dynamic piece to that. And again, adding to the kick return room and punt return room with him and Darius Davis, I think that's a very lethal tandem back there with two guys. So I think they're doing a great job with that. So I think he's a great weapon overall. You put him in on third downs. I think if he's even 80% of what he was in Indy, that's a great ad. So I love the Nyheim Hines ad. Only thing I would say that maybe add a corner or a wide receiver, namely Keelan Allen, like he's pounding the table for that. If you do that, then I'm liking what the Chargers are building and what they're going to take into 2025. But outside of that, I don't really have a lot of issues at this moment. And things are going well in camp and nobody's been hurt. So let's pray that continues. So that's my wrap up, man. Again, salute to Phillip Rivers and salute to Mike Williams in their retirement. Trey Harris is in house. Nyheim Hines is in house. I like what they're doing in that space, and the offense should be looking better than it was in 2024 already. We just got to find who's going to be the number one guy. And I will say this: Quentin Johnson, has been catching well so far, but let's see what happens when he start hitting. Will he continue that? And if he does, kudos to him. And I'm hoping I'm wrong about him, but until then, I got to see him be against live bullets, and will he, quote unquote, revert back to the guy he was before, being inconsistent, or has he grown? Has he finally grown? We're waiting on that still, Quentin Johnson. So we'll see. But as always, man, hit that subscribe button for the channel. Let everybody know in YouTube land that we're doing big things out here in Chargers world. Follow all our videos. You can like, comment, subscribe to anything you've seen. Give me your feedback in the comment section, and we'll be back in short order with more training camp news, as training camp is fulling on, and the Hall of Fame game is next Thursday. So we got a lot to cover between now and then. But until then, you got to always remember to bolt up.